I've thought a lot about why are people deceived? Here in recent times, we've all been shocked by the fact that people we never thought would come under obvious deceptions have just embraced falsehoods as the norm. I remember, I think it was Kellyanne Conway, to whom the phrase alternative facts has been attributed. I'm sure she said those words. They're alternative facts. And alternative facts, of course, suggest an alternative reality, of which the allegations are said to be factual within an alternative reality. So what allows for, what enables this sort of mass migration from what everyone knows or everyone used to know was true? What has caused this mass migration into this alternative reality, complete with alternative facts? And what's interesting is, even when aspects of this alleged alternative reality have been thoroughly debunked, people don't change. They still do not change. Then they turn to an attack, a posture of attack against principles, against the individuals who might be associated with what can be considered present and verifiable reality. Even the realities that are empirically ascertained and can be tested are said now to have a very different reality to them. Interestingly, Kennedy has just been appointed to oversee the nation's health. Well, in his progression, he started out believing in certain elements of science. But then along the way, and I wish not to attribute any set of particular influences upon him, but along the way he changed to becoming an avid anti-vaccine person. But then, having been confirmed as the Secretary of Health, and there being an outbreak of measles in Texas, in West Texas, around places like Seminole, Texas, and the pressure and spotlight comes to be focused on the Secretary of Health. He says he's not opposed to vaccines. Now, again, I bring these things up not because I am pro-vax or anti-vax. These are not my issues. I'm not concerned about them. I understand that lots and lots of people are obsessed. And my saying I'm not concerned about these issues is likely to cause a chorus of howls of outrage. How could you not be concerned? Well, they're not my issues. You know what? There's not one thing I can do that will make a difference as to whether or not people choose to get vaccinated. Not one bit of difference. And frankly, part of the distress that has come upon the nation is the fact that people now have cast their identity and they're at the point where their identity depends upon whether or not you agree with them. So at the heart of someone being offended that I would say, these are not my issues. As a friend of mine is fond of saying, these are not my monkeys, and this is not my circus. There's nothing I can do about these things. But more to the point, I choose not to find an identity in whether or not people should get vaccinated. That's their choice. And I understand that people would say, well, how could you be like that and be any kind of leader? Well, what I'm leading in doesn't depend in any part on any of these issues. That's the sad truth. The sad truth is that people have made their identities an outgrowth of their convictions in these social matters. You know what? Everybody is going to die. Everyone you know, including yourself, is going to die eventually. And the silence of death renders a nullity to all these issues. Beyond the grave, these things do not matter. The end of your life, these things do not matter. But you could make it all that you want it to be if your identity depends upon it. I speak, and I'm preoccupied with an eternal point of view. Most, if not all, of these issues are concerned about temporal things. And in the end, you see, all temporal things come to an end. The ideas that dominate discussion today, around which people seek to draw others and create constituencies to advocate for particular points of view. The certainty about all of this is that it shifts and changes. The issues change even as people change, as time advances, and so on. So if you're going to actually make a difference, and if what you are and what you think is actually relevant, it had better be based in an eternal point of view. There was a time when, in the history of the world, more than a third of the population of Europe died in what was known as the Black Plague. That was, in that day, a preeminent issue. Today, only in very rare cases is the scourge even known to exist. And most people have no knowledge that there was a time when it decimated the population of Europe. That certifiably was a front-burning issue. Today, it's not even known in any appreciable form. So, I just wanted, pardon me, here at the beginning of this discussion on why are people deceived, I wanted to open with the thought that the issues that you think the world revolves around, or that all things stand or fall on those issues, the people you think are so vastly important because they're important to you and they're important today, history will render them footnotes, sidebars. So when people are alive and are obsessed with things to the point of developing constituencies around the ideas that they hold forth and hold passionately to, what is it that drives people like this? What exactly causes this to be so? The answer is that the human soul has three imperatives that it decides have to be resolved. That everything relating to these three imperatives are of critical importance, and they will pursue them to the distraction of every other consideration. These three things are, number one, the lust of the flesh. Number two, the lust of the eyes. And number three, the pride of life. Now, the lust of the flesh has to do with an identity. It has to do with an obsession with certain facts and circumstances to make sure that they occur in order for you to be happy, in order for you to be content. Without the existence of these things, you don't have a basis for determining your own well-being. I've known people who are the extremes of the lust of the flesh. And I'll give an example of an extreme just to illustrate the point. But everyone in their souls are susceptible to the lust of the flesh. I know this fellow, he's fairly wealthy, and he is one of the most controlling people I know. He controls when it's none of his business, or he attempts to control when it's none of his business. He attempts to assert his rule and his authority in circumstances that do not concern him. If he's standing in a crowd of strangers and he has an idea of what needs to happen, he will take it upon himself to try to arrange everybody in a certain way. Because in order for him to feel like he has purpose, in order for him to feel any measure of contentment or well-being or satisfaction, everybody has to be looking where he's pointing. Now, there are too many people like that in our world. All of us know people like that. But whether it's that kind of extreme, where your opinion and view, in order for you to feel comfortable, in order for you to feel at rest, in order for you to feel like you are not threatened, you have to change everything around you. For so many people, it's like that. But for even many more people than that, they're not aggressive like that. Theirs is a scaled-down version of that. But they cannot feel at ease, they cannot feel at rest, unless and until everything points in the direction they think it should go in. Stories told about this music composer who was visiting a friend of his who was also a composer. And during the evening, the host played one of his guest pieces, one of his compositions. And he played it all the way through on the piano, except for the last note. He just stopped short of the last note. Somewhere about 2 a.m, that time, footsteps were heard on the stairs of the two-story house where they were staying. The bedrooms were upstairs. Footsteps were heard on the stairs. And then things got quiet. And then the final note was played on the piano, just the one note. And footsteps were heard on the stairs of the guest returning to his bedroom upstairs because he literally could not rest until that last note was played. So lusts are compulsions. They're things that have to happen, things that have to be pursued in order for a person to feel like they're well, to feel like they're whole, to feel like the world is right. And in that rather silly example, this composer could not rest until the last note was played. Literally, he tossed in his bed, trying to quash the impulse to not hear that note in his head, until his resistance was futile. So he got up and went downstairs and played the final note. This is like my friend, like the man I knew years back, who had to control everyone, who had to control everything. The lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life are three of the greatest motivators of all human beings. Now, the lust of the eyes has to do with your vision of how things ought to be. We sometimes wonder where certain ones come up with the energy to try to get everybody to believe what they believe. That's the lust of vision. Not just that things should be going in your direction in order for you to feel like you have being and purpose, but a compulsion to have your vision be the dominant vision. For many years, Fidel Castro was solely in charge of the lives of everybody on the island of Cuba. I visited Cuba several times, and I saw firsthand what one man's vision for everyone else leads to. The people were scared because an easy way to get into prison, to be put into the harsh prisons of Cuba, was to disagree with the vision of the man in charge. He was so preeminent in the minds of people in his lifetime that they simply referred to him as El, Spanish word for him. And sometimes they'd make a gesture like they were stroking an imaginary beard. So El, together with the gesture, left no doubt that they were talking about him, because his vision was the only vision. Now the people were hollowed out, opportunities to advance economically were non-existent, poverty was the order of the day, and on and on. His vision was the most stultifying vision imaginable. But on the island of Cuba, it was the only vision. And if you weren't going to subject to his vision, you had to find some way off the island. Or he effectively rendered you a mute, where nothing you say could challenge his hegemony. And if you said it carelessly, the walls literally had ears, so to speak, the walls had ears. And somebody would tell on you, you'd be spirited away in the night, incarcerated without trial, and that was that. So the idea of your vision prevailing is very much at the heart of the lust of the eyes. Now, I understand that in religious circles and in general parlance, that when you talk about the lust of the flesh, people think of sexual lust. When they think of the lust of the eyes, people think of a wandering eye, another version of sexual lust. These are examples, but they're not definitive or descriptive of the genre. The genre is much broader than that. And then the pride of life, the third of these things that would cause you to be self-deceived first, and then to deceive others next. Third of these things is called the pride of life. Now, the pride of life is your conviction, your sense that what you can do to make it happen, it being your vision, what you could do to make it happen is what it takes to do it. And so pride of life is about your strength, whether your strength personally or your strength in conjunction with other people that you could kind of talk into or join an infiltrator group and end up leading it, to the end that the collective power that you and those with you who are like you possess can guarantee the outcome of what you lust after as the lust of the flesh, what you lust after in terms of your vision, or the lust of the eyes. So when these conditions exist, people rarely ever second guess themselves. Because as far as they're concerned, these three things are what you spend your life pursuing. We were talking the other day about a person whose life, when she died, whose life was collected in a box, not a coffin, but in a storage box. All of what she had that was of value was in a storage box. And it wasn't that much. I'm not talking of monetary value. It didn't have very much monetary value. It wasn't that much in terms of the objects. And yet they were the things in her day that defined life, her life. And it was dramatically underwhelming. Now, I know a lot of millennials think because the mountain they're trying to climb is in front of them, and there's some way up on this mountain. I know they tend to think, because they're not alone in this, everyone who has come before them has been like this, but for them it's the new challenge. And they tend to think that new challenges are unprecedented. Nobody's ever confronted these issues before. And they tend to think that their training, the collective vision of a group, or their personal vision for life, that these things are the only things that matter. Now, I got news for you. When you get to the top of the mountain where these dreams and hopes rest on the summit, you will find that you still have all the doubts and fears you ever had. And owning or possessing or arriving at or having some or all of these things doesn't make any difference. What a shock to find out when you spent your whole life defining things in a certain way and pursuing them, leaving relationships, leaving commitments, leaving all manner of things behind, just so you could get to the top of that hill, only to find that when you have, it's not that you don't get it. It's not that you don't get it. The worst is not that you didn't get it. The worst is that you did get it. Because what you'll find is all of your hopes that were placed in a certain result and your hopes to avoid and to be greater than the pitfalls that you watched others fall into, often it's your parents. You think your parents didn't try hard enough, your parents weren't smart enough, you're so much smarter, and so on and so forth. I'm here to tell you today, when you get everything you can imagine life is about now from this place where you are, when you get it, you'll find that it's all empty, that it does not give you what it promised, because it never asked to be thought of that way. It was you who decided to think about it this way. And you know, when people have this kind of crazy obsession because they only tell the parts of the story that contribute to them getting the things they want. I watch young people all the time. Now, quickly, let me say, this isn't only about young people. I watch people who have grown old but maintain the same attitude. But so often in my encounters with so many young people, not the majority of the ones I interact with, but a great many, either they won't tell you the truth because they don't know the whole truth, and therefore they only tell you the portion of the truth that makes the case for them. Either that, or they don't know the whole truth because they stopped at the point where they learned the pieces that they wanted. And I've spent endless hours with young people deconstructing the stories that they tell me and the narratives that they create. And what I find is the first time they ever allow themselves to think about more of the story than they were comfortable with was when I brought up issues that, from my perspective, these were the obvious issues. And the fact that they hadn't thought about them, or the fact that they kept them hidden until I brought them into the light, is indications to me of how powerful these three lusts are. They become idols to you. They become an idolatry. Ancient people created idols out of stone and other materials and worshiped them. Modern people create versions of life that they enshrine in their innermost thoughts, and they bow down to these versions of, these are the new gods. They bow down to them, they worship them, they hold them dear, they resist any examination or scrutiny. They don't, anything that threatens that idyll, they're fiercely opposed to. Now that, you see, is self-deception. that is you deceiving yourself. The one thing that you have an absolute duty to do, the one duty you owe to yourself, is the truth. What is the truth? Beginning with, what is the truth about me? Where am I deficient? Where am I blind? What are the dark corners of my soul? It is common for young people to form friendships for the sole purpose of reinforcement. They want their existing views of life to be reinforced by the people they let into their friends group. And they wouldn't think of it being otherwise. And in fact, if someone begins to talk, whether intentionally or just, they're talking. Talk in ways that do not go along with the groupthink, those individuals quickly find themselves on the edge of the friends group, not in the middle, because nobody wants to hear from them if what they have to say upsets or challenges the status quo. What you want to hear, what you want to think, what the group wants to hear, what the group wants to think. It's interesting to overhear, to sit sometimes in restaurants and overhear groups of young people talking. A common feature of this kind of supposed communication, common feature is they're talking over each other. I've noted how over the years, spaces like restaurants that used to be, on occasion, used to be quiet, and you could go for a meal with somebody, well, like your wife and you could go to a place and have a quiet meal and have a quiet conversation and experience moments of quietness and delight. Now, almost every restaurant is like a sports bar. Yeah, almost every restaurant, regardless of their theme, is like a sports bar, even high-end restaurants. And mostly, it's young people jabbering away like magpies. And they're talking over each other. And they think loud talking and chattering like that, this form of Twitter, they think that's social interaction. But I promise you, they're not listening to each other. It's comical to me to sit and observe this a group of young college students, for example, or a group of young business people. Often my travels call me to be in hotels on Fridays. And of course, Friday night is that time. So you get to sit and watch a group of young people getting ready for the weekend or having the start of the weekend. And the idea of fun is loud talking, chattering, jabbering. In the din of these meet and greets, nobody pretends that any of this is intimate. They just want to be seen. It's about seeing and being seen. What am I saying, really? Am I just down on a generation? No, I'm explaining how the culture works. And it's a culture in which you can sound like you've talked to everybody, but nobody heard you. And you come away feeling like you have shared when it makes no difference. So the fact that the environment was conducive, even environmentally, even just the existence of a certain kind of environment, lends itself to being deceived, self-deception. I want to, in the next broadcast, I want to go into the meaning of the word deceit or deception or deceitful, things like that, just to show you how unaware, how thoroughly unaware this very highly educated people, this extremely, probably the most educated generation, is, how unaware they are of elements of deception. Everything from the environment to the subject matter to the persons present to the means of communication to the accepted norms of interaction, on and on and on. And none of that even includes what I said before about demonic spirits who have come into the world with an intent to disrupt the order of things and to cause widespread deception and ultimately panic. I'm Sam Solon. We're talking about deception, probably the key and critical environmental factor of your generation, of this generation. We'll talk some more about it when we come back. I'll see you then. Goodbye for now.
May mercy, grace, and peace be with you always. Thank you for watching.